Hello and welcome back. My name is Andrea Miller. I'm your host of Open Relationships Transforming Together. I'm joined by my amazing co-host, Joanna Schroeder, and wonderful producer, Brian Adkins. We have an amazing guest for you today, Ed Latimore. Just hold for his super cool bio. I'm just going to really reinforce why we're doing this show. We are here to transform together. And when I think about the unique crucible that relationships afford us, it doesn't feel good some of the times. Let's face it, a lot of the times. But we are here in relationship to heal, to grow, and ultimately transform. It's not a theory. It's not in a lab. We transform together out in the wild. And that's why we're doing the show, because this is how we set ourselves free. Okay, with that, Ed Latimore is a former professional heavyweight boxer, a competitive chess player, and a best-selling author who holds a BA in physics from Duquesne University. He is currently working on his next book, Hard Lessons from the Hurt Business, Boxing Lessons in Risk, Relationships, and Reality, set to be published by Penguin Random House in 2025. Ed focuses on self-development, fatherhood, realizing your full potential, and sobriety, all of which he approaches from personal experience, overcoming poverty and addiction, and has a huge engaged social following. Ed, I am eager to talk with you about all these important topics. Joanna and I always like to talk with people that have dealt with alcoholism because that's a very shaping force in our lives. But first, you're a passionate advocate for the red pill community. Oh. You spoke at an event called Make Women Great Again. So do you personally believe that women are no longer great?
I never spoke at that event.
Oh, you didn't?
At that event, no. So it's a funny story about that. So I was very passionate about the 21 convention initially, and went and actually spoke there twice because, and you can see the speeches I gave on.
I've watched them. I've watched them.
And then you can see like the kind of the content and the slant. It's really about what really how to relate to people. I mean, and the second one is about the crisis that I think young men are facing today. Okay, then the guy approaches and comes up. He was talking about this idea for a while about the 22 convention. I think he called it about make women great again. And I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, this is such a bad idea. This has got to be a joke, right? So I don't even like say anything. And then all of a sudden it launches, and I'm like, this is real. And he used a photo from when we all spoke together as from the 21, and I messaged him. I said, hey man, like you have to get me out of that photo, because people started messaging me.
Oh, I am so sorry, Ed. That is a cautionary tale.
Oh man, look, let me tell you something. And I used to have this. Are you familiar with the one true Scotsman fallacy?
No, but I would love to hear it. Okay, well, some of us aren't, so please tell us.
The one true Scotsman fallacy, the idea is that if I say something, that a certain trait or series of behaviors belongs to a group, and you go, no, it's not really that. That a true, Scotsman would never do such a thing, which is as a refutation of someone's logic. I found myself for many years being that guy about the red pill, because I fully admit and still say, a lot of those ideas helped me develop, and I understand the appeal of them as someone who comes from a single mom and raised without any masculine guidance. It's very much the way gangs recruit, and when you don't have any guidance, here's some guidance. Here's how to help you figure out this situation in life. The society's, kind of dismissed young men. Here's what we should do, right? Let me tell you something. I got really tired of doing that, and especially in the past year, just looking at some of the behaviors that have come out of the community as a whole. And I don't go on the offensive about most things, including this. So I'm never going to use my platform to go out there and lambast the red pill movement. But at the same time, you noticed I laughed when you said you're part of the red pill community. I'm like, don't put me there, because what I've done, I've been very smart, and this has much been to the chagrin of many, not many, but enough people in my personal life to where it's been a repeating pattern. I refuse to denounce somebody based on their ideas or what they have said. Now if you've done some heinous wild stuff, yeah, that's where I draw the line. But just saying
Okay,
stuff,
what
whatever.
about white supremacists? Or like,
Oh, he
like,
fucked him. I mean, you talking about me?
okay, so we've got extremes, but as long as it's
Yeah.
not avowed like terrorism, and by the
As
way,
long as you're not advocating for hurting people in any way, shape, or form.
yes.
That's where I draw the line. But like, I can't like anymore have myself associated. And to that point, I have to learn that on my own. I want to see. You got to get close enough to see something for yourself. I was just telling my wife this yesterday about this very same topic in regards to certain creators that I know and I'm close to. You want to get close enough to where you understand the true nature of something or someone, but you don't want to get so close that your vision is distorted, that you end up seeing the tree and missing the forest. And I've done a really good job of that over the past few years, largely because a lot of these guys latch is probably, I'll use the verb latch. A lot of these guys latch onto me for a sense of credibility because when you look at my life from the outside, it's like, oh, here's this guy that is into the red pill, but he's also, got a professional sports background in college and has a family and a wife. Clearly, there's nothing wrong with this guy. It's you guys. And I realized I'm the outlier.
And especially if you're playing a competitive chess, you got to be good.
Yeah. And so there's this whole, so it's like, boom, let's latch on to use that. And when I finally kind of realized where this all looked and how it looked, and I was like, you know what? Don't tie me to that.
But okay, but explain what the red pill movement is.
All right, so I'm gonna do my best to
just in a couple sentences to give context to people.
The idea is that you've been fooled, and that deception is what is causing all of your problems in life with the opposite sex. And so what the red pill does, drawing off the idea of the red pill that most people are familiar with from the Matrix movie. Anyone listening I learned that like anyone under like 18 hasn't seen this movie. That's crazy. And that's probably me skewing it a little lower, but to make myself feel better. And then going all the way back to like Total Recall, there's like this idea of the red pill, you take it and your mind is freed. So it's like, okay, here are red pill ideas to open your mind up about everything. The problem is, in theory, that sounds quite harmless. In application, the type of people who end up leading this movement also, they never progress past the initial dissatisfaction that brought them there. They talk about these stages of the red pill. It's like first you're like in denial, and then you're faced with the problem. Then there's like, okay, I will accept how this goes, and then you go and deal with it. But part of that is like a very real anger phase when the wool comes off, and that's cool. Like I get it. Like I think every guy goes through that. The problem is when you stay there and you don't take responsibility for your role in the issue.
Totally. That's what when in reading your work and watching your videos, I was just sincerely flummoxed because, like you, I'm such a passionate advocate for personal responsibility. Only I can set myself free, right? And yet it feels like in the red pill movement, the implication, not even, it's like overt implication, is blame. And it's like, you can't have blame and personal responsibility. Those cannot coexist.
And not at all. And it's really turned into, well, because I'm a thinker, I always tell people that when you make pursuing the truth of a matter your primary objective and your modus operandi, you're doing a good job when you're not popular. Because contrary to most people think, this guy's just out for the truth. He'll end up appealing to everyone. No. You piss both sides off. You piss off one side because you'll come up and say something that rejects what they say and appears to side with the other. And people always remember the hurt more easily and more readily than they do the confirmation and the positivity. So even though you'll come out and say something that aligns with them maybe a week later or in the next issue, they remember when you pissed them off, and now the other side is pissed off at you now because you're against them.
Yeah, Ed, I've got to tell you, you're going to relate to this. So when I first started writing and managing the Good Men Project, so I have a degree in, it was called Women's Studies, but I studied masculinity in literature, okay? And I started working for the Good Men Project, and I was writing and managing, and they had a problem with the men's rights advocates that I know you know about. This was like 2010, 2011, and it was very early phase of talking about men's issues. And everybody who I knew who was a feminist or pro-woman was like, you've got to get away from these guys. They're awful. And a lot of them were awful, and they were awful to me. They didn't think I belonged at the Good Men Project. And what I started doing was just listening. Like, what's happening? So some of these guys hated women. They became the incel movement. But what I was really hearing is a lot of them were male survivors of abuse. A lot of them were male survivors of domestic violence. A lot of them had had horrible things happen to them in their custody arrangements with their children. And these were wounds. And at that time in society, it was laughed off. It was like, men can't, what? I'm sure that guy's a horrible guy. He didn't do anything. Or like, oh, he was abused as a kid. I bet he's a pervert now. There were so many horrible things and no advocacy. So what happened with that hurt that these guys were carrying around? They would turn to the only group that would say, your pain is real. And so it was like, we have to find a way to separate the real advocacy for these guys actually having better lives from the guys who are like turning them, trying to turn them into anti-woman, hateful, spiteful, what we now call incels, right?
You had the nail on the head. I'm part of this group, Starts With Us, and they're doing fantastic work in depolarizing the political climate around the United States mainly, but the mission now is really expanded worldwide as we figured out that nothing is really local anymore because of the internet and the reach and the omnipresence of communication networks. And really just some stellar people are part of this movement. There's a guy in there who was a former white supremacist and is recovered. I love his book. I bought his book. It's called The Cure for Hate. This guy, Tony McAleer. And he said on the last meeting something that has really stuck with me. And he talks about this idea in the book too. He said when he used to work for I can't remember this project. It was dealing with people who were coming out of hate groups. And he got a letter from a mom. And the mom was talking about how her son now spends all of his time and it really identifies with the white supremacist movement because his classmates rejected him so strongly because I guess he's on the needs spectrum. And she said the thing that was scariest is that no one accepted him like the supremacist movement. They made him feel okay. And this is a thing that I wish everyone understood is when you get a group of people who appear to just be, we'll just use the incel movement or MGTOWs, NRAs, whatever you want to call them, or MRAs, not NRAs. If you don't understand what took them there and you just attack them, then one of my friends says it best, you're putting down flags, and those flags are telling people where the battle is. And that's all those flags do. They don't attract people who are coming to mediate the battle. They don't even attract medics in the purest sense to like save people. They're going to attract other warriors looking for a fight, and no one wants to fight more than someone who feels wrong.
Oh, and rejected. I mean,
yeah.
I feel like it's got to be, the word really, I don't know if anybody's ever studied this, I bet, but sincerely one of the worst, if not the worst feeling you can go through, right? Just to feel like you personally are rejected, it's so dehumanizing. Well, there's been a lot of connection between rejection and shame, and there is lots of documentation that shame turns to anger, especially in boys and men, because we have pushed them down so hard. There's a guy named Christian Picciolini who also was a former white supremacist who, when he came out of prison, he reformed his life and also does the work that the guy you're referencing does. And he told the story of he got recruited to become a skinhead in a back alley behind a club at like 3 a.m. He was 15. And he's like, because they knew if there was a 15-year-old out in a back alley at 3 a.m., he was a vulnerable kid. Well, now we have all these sources online. And I wrote an article in the New York Times about this. We have all these sources online where they are looking for kids oftentimes that are autistic. They're looking for kids who are bullied. They start with gamers and they target their chat rooms and they'll say to them, no one gets you like us.
It's the same playbook. Well, one of the, I would never wish it on anyone, but one of the best things about growing up the way I grew up is I've seen so many scams or hustles that a lot of people are getting hip to now on the internet. And I'm like, that's how I can recognize, when someone's coming along just spitting the nonsense. And this playbook is no different than the playbook the gangs use. Like no different. The kids with no guidance, no father, they want to feel powerful. They want to feel capable, competent, like someone cares. Come join us. All you got to do is do this and you're in. And then it becomes a self-destructive cycle where you continue to do that stuff so you can identify more with them and that you don't identify with anyone else and you end up walling yourself off. And it's only that group that you want that accepts you. And then to step over to the other side takes so much courage that the average person can't muster it, because you got to simultaneously deal with the fact that you're likely not going to be accepted immediately, if ever. And you're throwing away the only support system that you've come to know.
And you're really in it, like on both. You've really seen this. You've watched the red pill movement develop. Walked away from it.
Walked hand in hand with it. I've been to the events. I've spoken at the conferences. Man, I've even been on Fresh and Fit. Like I've seen it all from all angles, and I can tell you 100% that the reason this movement is succeeding and has grown, I had dinner with Andrew Tate. I've made sure to understand clearly before I formed an opinion and a perspective to go. But the main strength of this movement is the dissatisfaction and the dismissal of young men's issues.
But hang on, I've got 2 burning questions. So just starting with Andrew Tate, he's obviously a very divisive figure. You've gotten close to him. What's your take?
I've really, what's the best way to say this? I think he's a smart dude.
So is Hitler.
Well,
okay, sorry, go ahead.
But what I'll say is, like, I think he sees the need, and I think it's more of a business angle than anything. I don't, whether he was hurt or not hurt, I can't speak to. But what I can speak to is how profitable this end is. And a lot of the evil that we see sometimes is nothing more than the emergent traits, or emergent characteristics of unrestrained capitalism, I guess. I wouldn't, and look, I'm a capitalist through and through, but I always talk about capitalism being like salt. It took 2 things that by themselves are quite dangerous and bad for you. Hate and greed, greed and self-interest, combine them and created a tool that has really lifted more people out of poverty than it's put back into it. And I say the same thing about what was I talking about? Capital. So sometimes I get about salt, right? Like salt is with potassium and chlorine. Individually, they're really explosive and dangerous. Combined, vital for life, right? So that's my stance on capitalism, but I also understand when it's a problem, and I think what Andrew Tate has done masterfully. And look, if you don't respect your opponent, you can't do anything about it. And
I just have to interject because I have a 14-year-old son, and I'll tell you a really personal story. We were sitting at dinner over the Christmas or holiday break, and I asked him who some of his heroes are. And he was like, Roger Federer and another sports guy, I can't remember. And then he said Andrew Tate, and my heart stopped. And I said, well, why do you like him? And he said a lot of the good things, he's a smart guy, all this stuff, wealthy guy. And I said, well, let me just go into the internet and tell you a little bit more maybe that you don't know about Andrew Tate. He thinks rape victims must bear responsibility for their attacks. In other clips, the British-American kickboxer who, blah, 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 that doesn't even matter, talks about hitting and choking women, trashing their belongings, and stopping them from going out. This is the one, I literally read it to my son, and he was appalled. It's bang out the machete, boom in her face, and grip her by the neck. Shut up, bitch. He says in a video, that's not a deep fake. So when I hear, it's just so hard to hear somebody who is as thoughtful and intelligent as you are, Ed, say it's just about capitalism. It's about somebody who is abusing capitalism. I think we all need to say, this guy's a problem.
No. When I say that, I guess that's the point I'm making, is that it is an abuse of capitalism.
Yeah. I didn't hear that. Right? I heard it was like smart guy. And by the way, I'm sure he was. I am sure terrible things happened to him, because you only behave that way if terrible things happen to you. But the problem is, people like my son, who is a good kid, an innocent kid, is saying, oh yeah, Andrew Tate. And I'm like...
And here's the other part of this too, right? And the fact that you had to look that up goes to show that it's not like the information isn't out there to form a full picture. But it's what is the 14-year-old going to be exposed to?
That's it. And
almost certainly the algorithm isn't going to promote that side of it, right? It didn't promote it to me. I had to go look for it because look, I'll stand on whatever I say. Like, no matter what, if I get backlash for saying this from folks, whatever, right? Because it doesn't matter to me, because I need to feel good. Like, at the end of the day, I have a son. I got to be able to go, yeah. Oh, he's a little baby. He's 14, but he won't be 14 months, 15 months in 3 days. But he won't be forever. And one day he's going to have to look back and be like, okay, well, what did my dad stand for? What did he say? How was it go? And making that decision, yeah. All of that stuff about his treatment and abuse of women, that shit is, it's no good. Not only is it's no good, but what they've been able to do very skillfully is promote one end without bringing the other end in, and because the algorithm puts out information,
it's a Trojan horse strategy, right?
Yes,
you get them in with the goodies, and then you get them in, and that's when that perversion occurs, right?
Yeah.
And there's a way in which the media has to be super careful when we're talking about people like that, because one of my kids is grown now, another one's in high school. What I learned was when they started seeing that stuff, and Andrea, they did. Obviously, that was how I ended up becoming the person that talks about this crap all the time. But they see it. They see not only what your son saw, like, man, he's so confident. He's got 1 million cards. He's got these gorgeous babes. Then when they see reactionary media being like, and he murders children, like, maybe we don't say that, but we do sometimes take it too far. And then the kid finds out, my mom said he does XYZ, and he doesn't do that, so everybody's lying about him.
Oh, that's like your brain on drugs, right?
Exactly.
Back in the day. It's like it makes it so you can't believe anything. Yeah. So then you're like, all right, I'm just going to do whatever feels right.
I don't believe it. Exactly. And it failed with that, with the Just Say No, Nancy Reagan's Just Say No. It failed with that. And my reaction when my boys first started seeing that stuff was, I had, like I just said, I dealt with all those MRAs, and these MRAs wanted me dead, and they made it clear.
What's an MRA? Just for
men's rights advocates.
Yeah.
And they would literally be like, we want you dead. We know where your kids go to school. That's how much they hated me. Okay.
Yeah.
And when I heard my kids using and parroting that language, because now they were online, I had this like, this trigger truly to it. And my husband, thank God for my husband, was like, they are not doing that. Your kids are not doing that. They saw a little piece. And if we freak out, it's only going to make them not trust us about it.
Yeah, exactly. Two things about that. This is why, I have to come back and be clear, because I speak, the way I speak, I use the word is meaning goes, and then I don't attach the emotional meaning to it, and sometimes that gets me in trouble forgetting how it's perceived. So when I say intelligent, I am speaking to the ability to get what you want with as little effort or as possible. With that said, the fact that we're able to present a fact, or maybe not a fact, just a story, and you a very smart person who wants to attack that and discredit you, they're gonna blow up. They're gonna magnify and blow up the parts that are incorrect, are inaccurate, even slightly, and use that to cast doubt on everything. And the more vitriol or reactiveness is, our energy is put behind that story that is being discredited, the more vindicated they're going to look when it's and even if it's just a small bit that is proven false. So we have to be careful there. But here's the other thing too, and this is something more, I guess, more directed to what you were saying, Andrea, about your initial reaction to kind of the adjectives I was using to describe Tate. One of the more potent conversations I've had in my life was with a guy named Tom Fishman. He's the guy, I guess, the CFO or CMO. I'm not quite sure what his role is or starts with us, but he's the big leader that runs all this. And we had like a one-on-one call that he has with all our members, and he's got a physics background as well. And I was like, this is cool. A guy who ended up in media with a physics background, very similar to mine, except he went to way better schools than I went to. But he talked about the plan for dealing with Trump. And the way he talked about it, he said, you have to understand and look at what Trump's done. And it's been brilliant. And he's not a Trump fan. He's just pointing out the brilliancy of what he's done. And he goes, if we can take his tactics and apply them and get to the next generation before he does, then we can win. If we can, and the goal being to get people away from being polarized. And he discussed it, and we were able to use kind of a thermodynamic analogy, and it was really cool. But the point of bringing all that up, especially that last point, is I really believe, and I continue to believe, and that's why I conducted myself the way I conducted myself for so long, to understand and really see where everyone sat, where everyone stood, and what the idea was, that if you don't understand your enemy, your opponent, that you the very least you're coming in with a significant disadvantage, because they sure as hell understand you. If for any other reason, and they're going to be proactive and they're attacking your weaknesses and watching you react. The playbook is it's kind of a shame, but as far back as the when you were working with the men's rights activists, I'm guessing like from like the Tom Likas era, those guys, right? They know the game plan. The only difference now between then and now is social media is incredible. They don't have to battle and get the mainstream to fight.
Oh yeah, no, it's a magnifying agent, like like we've never seen before. I feel like we need a quote from The Art of War in this.
I was just going to say, one of the things that Tony McAleer says in his book, when he's talking about how the Klan recruits, he's like, the Klan will go into town and they'll leave a bunch of flyers on cars and businesses, and they know those aren't going to recruit most people, but what they expect is a stink from it. And the people, and that stink is going to magnify the reach that those would have ever.
Yeah, it's going to stir up some curiosity.
They're not interested in recruiting from the flyers. Then the flyers, that's not the real point. The point is to get you to react.
They're creating some forbidden fruit, right? They're getting the parents and the people who are going to reject it and talk about it and get outraged, and it's going to create curiosity among their kids. But let me, in the spirit of curiosity, I'm sincerely curious. In part, I mean, the point of the show, Transforming Together, is transforming through relationships and how we change vis-a-vis each other. So I'm sincerely curious about you were a fan of Red Pill, and it sounds like now you're not. But like the episode that I watched this morning, you talked about, your concern about boys being turned into girls. And, there are a handful of things that made me feel like that I bristled. And I'm just trying to figure out how much of that is red pill. And you've said that's not for me anymore versus how much of that is, is still part of your version of masculinity that you would still stand behind.
So both of those speeches, and I know which point you're talking about the one in Poland, I'd imagine, that was the one about boys. I stand behind both of the things that both of those completely, because I would never, especially at the point in my life where I was when I put those out there, anything that I put out, I've thought carefully about mostly to say. Now, as far as what you specifically referenced right there about, I think I said that boys are being treated like defective girls. If you look at the numbers of, we'll use I think I referenced the ADHD diagnosis, how those have gone up, but they have gone up disproportionately in young men. And one of the things that I point out is that if we expect a boy to learn and interact with the world the same way as a young girl, then when he doesn't, it will be seen as an issue. We should expect the rates to have risen and conned for both, and also likely look a little more even. But instead what we see is the rates have risen, that's true, but they have outpaced in boys.
And we have that with addiction and death by suicide too with boys.
Well, and that's what I was
they're
going to say.
all rising, but
and men in prison, I mean, it seems like there's a correlation here that to me is less about the data and how boys are socialized than the generational trauma and how I mean, you talk about the number of boys that are in prison that were raised without fathers in their homes, and it feels like there is a lot happening socially that is causing all of these things to be correlated.
Absolutely. I do not deny that. But where I stand on it is that there is not nearly as much effort put forth to deal with this and to understand. We're told, even men, when a man complains about something, he's told by other men that you shouldn't be complaining.
Man up,
yeah,
right?
Yeah,
isn't that what we tell?
That comes from men and women. So what my concern is, and I speak about this whenever someone will listen anyhow, is that if you always look at data, because and raw data, not interpretation of data, because raw interpretation of the data can lie, but if you look at raw data, then you're going to get something you could work with. Okay. When you look at raw data, men until like 1970s-ish, women were making less and were graduating less and were, it wasn't an egalitarian society. And at one point, perhaps we were, but it has flipped heavily and much worse in the other direction than it had been prior to, in the favor of women. And my solution isn't, let's pull back girls. It's like, okay, let's look at why boys all of a sudden are like now graduating high school.
That's the trick.
Oh, yeah. And we're walking into the hornet's nest. By the way, I agree. I feel like it's just this really big conundrum when it's like it has been a man's world. Like it or not, it has been a man's world. And now more women are graduating from college and more women. And, I haven't checked the data, so maybe you have it. But it's my understanding is that across the workforce, women are still underpaid for similar jobs by like 15%. So that gap, I don't think, has closed entirely across the entire workforce. But I agree with you that there are fewer men going to college, and there is a chasm that is being created where women are increasingly going to have an economic advantage over men, an emotional economic advantage over men, and that is going to cause major disruption in our society, and it probably already has.
Yeah, so like
it has.
On the other end too, I am a ruthless realist, and I always say that that no side ever fights to a draw. Draw is something you accept. When you can't make progress anymore and you go, okay, we're stuck. But the moment you get a chance to get ahead, you try to. Now, it's unfortunate, but if you take that model of never fighting for a draw and you go, okay, what else does that apply to? It applies to things in conflict. And that speaks way more to the situation that I believe men and women are in today than ever before. And perhaps for quite some time, at least in the Western world, or maybe longer than people want to give credit. Because yeah, you're right. Like on the one end, I always say, people are like, why don't relationships last the way they did for our grandparents? And I'm the first to point out, and it's like, well, because your grandmother was closer to an indentured servant than anything else.
Yes.
It wasn't
She couldn't
until
leave.
it wasn't until 1972 that the last credit card company, stopped requiring it was written out of law, signature from her husband. I'm like, that's why. But, and I say that it just depends on who phrases the question, because I like I said, when you're honest, you don't get twice the love, you get like 4 times the hate.
Yep, you do.
I also point out that on the other end of it, with economic freedom, now it's like, do you really like someone? Are you really doing what it takes to be in a relationship or a solid relationship? It's like, well, probably not. There's a lot of work to do on both sides.
Yeah.
And and when you remove the artificial constraints on the market, to use some economic terminology, you see, people probably wouldn't have stayed married together so long if your grandmother could work and so.
Well, there's a really interesting thing that I always use as an example when people will say, but men are doing just fine. Like, why are you so focused on raising boys? And I'm like, there was this great example in my son's classroom. One of my sons is just a mover. He's a mover. He's a climber. When he was little, he's just that kid, right? Yeah. And he could not sit in his chair and he was in trouble all the time, right? It was like this child was just, he'd kick a chair over because he was standing, we've all seen it. And an occupational therapist got him a thing that went on his seat that was like a half of, like a Bosu ball at the gym, like a half of a bouncy ball, so that he was always having to balance. Okay. So he's sitting on this thing and he always was moving, but he could keep his hands on the desk. He wasn't going to knock anything over. And it was like, all of a sudden the moment was, the problem is not your child. And this is symbolic of boys. Okay. The problem was that chair did not work for him. So when we start looking at education like that, and there's some girls that need that seat, there's some boys that sit perfectly still, right? But when we start looking at our education and we go, everyone's going to sit at the same desk with the same chair for the same amount of time and be quiet to the same amount. And if not, we're going to make them feel like crap, right? We're going to make them feel defective, like you said. And it's like, change the chair for that child.
I love that. That's a great metaphor. Okay, so Ed, we always ask about people's uninvited Buddhas, a person or persons in their lives that they maybe resented, maybe resisted, maybe even rejected. But that ultimately, our guest discovered that this person had wisdom and something important to teach. Do you have an uninvited Buddha that has helped you transform and grow?
I'm trying to think. I've put a lot of energy to my life over the past 10 years to make sure I don't have to suffer people I don't want to suffer. So I'm trying to think.
But the people that you cut out, you probably learned something from.
Let me tell you something. I'll tell you a story. When I wrote my second book, Sober Letters to My Drunken Self, it was about sobriety, my journey, and helping people get sober. One of the things that I did, I felt super compelled to do it as I was writing, because when you get sober, it's like getting your soul back. You can see your behavior through a lens. I thought back to a few interactions I had with people who I thought had betrayed me and did me wrong. Reality is, and in a specific incident, there was this girl that I wasn't really interested in her, but she was around, and my friends, we'll put that in air quotes and you'll see why. So they had got together, and I found out, and they had told her that like she should date me because of my drinking. And 23-year-old me felt absolutely betrayed by that. When I'm writing this book, at 34, man, and that's 5 years ago, right? When I'm writing that book, I'm like, that's one of the best things that ever happened to me, because that I didn't get sober for a little while. I mean, I was like maybe 24, 25, because I remember where I was talking about. But the point is like, that put the idea in my head, and it got me to look at my behavior differently. And because of that, I was like, oh, there might be something here. And so I sent, a few of them a message. I was like, look, man, we fell out. I'm not like trying to get back in your life or vice versa. I hope, but I just want to let you know that because of that, you really set things in motion.
Oh my God, how did that feel?
It felt good. I mean, yeah, you can't do anything about the past, but you can take responsibility.
Totally. Yeah, you can reframe it, and that's the game changer, right? I mean,
once
the
you do
reinterpretation.
that, once you do that, then you're in a position to learn from it. But if you're not going to take responsibility, you not only is it going to happen again, the universe is great. It's going to keep giving you the same.
Oh yeah, whatever resists persists.
And then even if you pass the test, it's going to throw you a pop quiz every now and then just to make sure you didn't
That's
forget
mastery, baby.
What you learned the hard way, so you ain't got to learn it again.
Well, you're talking about recovery, and I wonder, just in my work, I've seen that there seem to be less kind of emotional support groups for men than what women have. Do you feel like that you had a bit of not an advantage, but maybe just a gift from being in your recovery program, that maybe you had a system of support and a landing place?
I got lucky. Because when I decided to get sober, there were 4 reasons, and those 4 reasons ate up my time. One, I had just enlisted in the Army, and so I was doing the whole National Guard thing, and I was worried about getting the UCMJ case. If you get, once you're enlisted or in the armed services, whether you're enlisted or commissioned, any civilian law you break is almost certainly illegal in the military as well, and you got to deal with that as well. So there was the military. I enrolled or enlisted in the military because I needed money to go back to school, and I said I really want to make sure I do this right. So school was in place. I had just turned professional as well, so I was like, okay, they gotta stay focused on fighting. And I had just met Anna, and I was like, this is a really nice girl. Like, I remember I was like, what a nice girl. I really don't want to expose her to any nonsense. So let me like clean all this up. So there's the motivation and the new relationship and all these things going on, but all of those things going on also kept me extremely busy. And so I didn't have time. I didn't go out before I was like out till like after dark and all that for over a year, because I was just so busy with everything. And by the time I went out again, it was like I could look at booze and be like, I don't think I want that, and walk away from it. So it was I changed a lot of my environment and inadvertently, and put a lot of things in place that like I used to think were optional, but now I know that if someone has a serious problem, you need 2 things. One, you can probably get away with not having a support system, is probably too strong of a word, because I never looked at Anna like a support system, but she definitely fell into point 2, which is my environment was just anti-alcohol. She doesn't really drink. Like, she's the type of person that'll open a bottle of wine, pour herself a glass, drink half the glass, and then the bottle goes bad. Because meanwhile, I'm like, I need to go out and get another bottle because I finished that one right before dinner, and now it's time to eat. So having those 2 things in place, but at the end of the day, you need a supportive environment.
Did you go to AA or did you do other things?
Oh man, I went to one AA meeting and I said arrogantly, I'm not like these people. Wow, they got problems. And then and then somebody hit me up on Twitter 4 years later. They were like, oh man, I see you talk a lot about sobriety. I'll be in your area. Let's go get your chip. I'd love to see you get your chip for 4 years. And I went and I was like, man, I am just like y'all. This is crazy. Like,
wow, that is amazing. That's beautiful. I mean, that just having that humility.
Yeah. I really, because you think that there's like, whether it's a stigma or you want to be like a tough guy, it's like, there ain't nothing really wrong with me. You know, I got a little problem drinking. Let me tell you, you can't, you got to stop the bleeding before you can like do anything to fix the wound. And when I stopped drinking, that was stopping the bleeding. It was only then that I realized, man, there was a lot of stuff going on. Like and it's cool because Anna's is a different, comes from a much more stable family, and it's just a much nicer person. And seeing how she responded to me, and seeing how now unfortunately I also did a lot of work on myself, so I didn't have a lot of automatic lash outs and problems, but you realize where your problems are. You realize there's a lot of trauma, a lot of stuff that leads to addiction, like a lot of stuff.
It's in a lot of ways, the addiction is only the tip of the iceberg. Like you say, it's fixing the wound, right? Like what's inside, whether it's drinking or sex, or in my case, workaholism, or in a lot of things, it's like that outside behavior is just the manifestation. What's inside, what needs to get fixed, that's where the real work occurs.
And you can disguise a lot of stuff.
You can disguise a lot, Ed. Yeah. I can disguise a lot. I think Joanna, you can too, right? That's the problem.
Yeah, but when you decide to like make a real change to your identity, because that's what alcohol was. It was part of my identity. When you make a real change, then you're forced to go, okay, well, who am I? And then you realize, who you are and how you got to where you are at this point, and there's a bunch of stuff that you got to do some work on the house.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's so beautiful. I mean, honestly, it's so inspiring to hear your story and just know what you've been through and that you did the work. I just also believe that each of us that chooses to do our own work and accept the hard truths of our hurt and our heartache and our trauma, and can say these things out loud, and actually will admit, yes, I have these things, and I am committed to healing. Like, to me, showing up is huge, but you can show up. I mean, again, as somebody, my parents loved me, Joanna. My sense is yours loved you too, but they didn't do the work. I mean,
right, exactly.
It's like there were all these good things, and so there were all the good things, and yet I struggled. And so when I think about you doing the work, that to me is how we change generational trauma.
And I think we don't give enough props to all of the men. Like my husband, his father was violent and he left them, and it not a good thing to say ultimately about that guy. My husband and his brothers have created the most amazing lives for their kids. Like, they consciously were like, we're going to be the best dads. And they are the 3 best dads. Like, they're amazing dads. Are they perfect? No, nobody's perfect. But like, I sometimes think we forget that so many dads in this generation have gone, I'm going to do it differently. And it's going to, I feel strongly that that's going to change the world. Truly.
Yeah. Like, and here's the other thing. That what you were saying, Andrea, do I have some guilt about this? Who knows? Probably not really. But love by itself, I've come to this conclusion after many, because I spent this past year writing a book that was part autobiography, part just an examination of culture and raising a son. And then my mom had just passed last year, so she shouldn't have. As you can see, my reaction, right? And And I've come to the conclusion that not only is love not enough, it's like, I don't want to say not necessary, but it's one of those things we like to say to make ourselves feel better, or to even justify some things. And the reality is, look, if I had to pick, I would rather, let's say my father loved me, and for that love, that's how he showed it. I would have rather him not move to another city and stayed around and kind of had, and just, and was someone I could talk to once a week or see once a week. I would rather my mom have had the discipline and drive to better her life and better our lives, and or have a way to talk this than love by itself. Like, what does that leave me? That leaves me with a feeling, that leaves me more confused. When I think about the way we were abused and neglected, that leaves me more confused. If she goes, but I loved you, I'm like, well, that's the confusing part. It's like, really? If you had just said, yo, I had some problems and I wasn't ready for kids and I don't even know if I love, I'd be like, all right, whatever, man. Like obviously, that won't make what you did look any better or worse, but it certainly will remove the confusion and maybe make you feel better.
Yeah, it's like you need love and truth.
Yeah,
right? Love and truth. Because I feel like so much of generational trauma is perpetuated because it is so freaking scary to tell the truth.
Yeah, I got another one for you too. I thought about this because, like, why do these things happen? Why do cycles of nonsense continue? And what is the hope for?
I like how you call it nonsense, so it's like hijinks. It's like a nice kind of way to keep it safe.
Yeah, and what is the hope for the future? Well, birth rates are down across all age groups except one, 35 plus. We're having more kids now, and people. I have a friend who argue that when people say that the brain's not fully developed by 25, until 25, they're just using that as an excuse, and your parents still got things together and did it. And I'm like, yeah, they did still get, raise kids or whatever. But I think about how much I knew at 25, right? And that's like the latest. When my mom had me when she was 23. And many of our parents had us when they were, early 20s. How much do you really know? But now, I have my son. I was 37 when he was born. That's a lot of life.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of experience.
I see where you're going with this. Yeah, I had my kids a lot older. Joanna, you run the gamut.
I've done both. Yeah, I had one at 27, one at 29, and then I had one at 40. And It is a different experience, but I'll tell you, my husband was 38 when our oldest was born, and he would tell you right now he would have had no business having kids before age 38. He would tell you. And I had him to help me keep perspective on things. And then in other ways, I had done a lot more therapy than he had done that he had to do later. So it kind of balanced out, right? But you're so right that there's a gift we give them when we've done the work, or at least know how to do the work when it comes up.
Yeah, and it takes time. There's a guy I'm friends with on Facebook. He's a little younger, and he's always saying, people keep crap about his age or whatever, with any advice. And I'm like, no, you just haven't done the work or whatever. And I'm like, look, man, you are mature for your years, but you have to understand, even from a physiological perspective, you're just not even there yet, not till you're at least 30. And that's assuming you fast track it, but you have to go through experiences, learn from them, and then integrate what you learn against many other experiences with people to kind of balance it out. Because we go through something that goes, oh, I'll never trust people who do that or say that, and then you meet someone else who doesn't have that issue, and you got to go, okay, but there's a more nuanced way to look at this. It's just over time. You cannot know as much. If you're doing life right. I mean, I don't think people get stupider per se. I just think they don't improve. And that can look the same way due to the lifestyle or the inflation effects on like lifestyle and knowledge and habits. But the point is, having kids later, I think, is want to be one of the things that is going to change the world, because you're no longer. It increases the likelihood that that the people raising children are just equipped with more tools to do the job of raising an emotionally balanced, stable child who is not too spoiled or are put through the ringer unnecessarily. Like, there's just a greater likelihood of that happen.
Is there one, just as we wrap up, if there was one lesson, what's your son's name? Henry. If there was one lesson that you could teach Henry, or one thing you could do for Henry, what would that be?
I don't know if
or
this
what is it?
I don't know if there's one lesson, but the one thing I absolutely want him to do, I want him to be strong enough to resist abuse. And then not abuse from us, or even abuse towards him, but be able to stand up to bullies. I want him to have a mind strong enough and a body strong enough, if need be, to never have to do something that he doesn't want to do or think a way that he doesn't want to think. Because if you can, I really believe this, if you can have somebody be strong, then they can be morally just, not just, but because, if you can't defend your position, if you can't protect other people, then it's amazing what atrocities can be committed by.
Well, totally. That sense of agency, I think, is really one of the ultimate things that we need to instill in our kids, right? So they can resist, like you say, whether it's white supremacists going after kids, boys that are told it's all your fault because you're a male, right? Or whoever it is. I'm with you. I think that is a top job for all of us parents.
Yeah, I'm excited about it though, because it's one of those things that I didn't have. And I got really lucky. There's a lot of my life. I work hard, but there's a lot of luck. A lot of luck involved.
My dad always says you create your own luck.
Yeah, except it's like you're born into. That one kind of, depending on your spiritual beliefs and all that. But
I like Oprah said, and maybe it wasn't Oprah who coined it, but I first heard it from Oprah, was luck is where preparation meets opportunity.
Yes.
And that addresses also the social injustice, because everyone can compare, but not everybody gets the same opportunities.
Yeah.
Very much
well, Ed,
so.
You are amazing. Thank you for being on our show.
This was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. You guys are a great duo, because without because some of the things I was saying, it was interesting watching the initial. You can't hide the initial reaction. How you put it out there afterwards, you can do it. But the initial reaction, I can see what's the best way? I think you guys have had somewhat different experiences that gives you just a different take on things that may at times clash. But the cool thing is, because we're all mature humans and we're trying to learn, and because the intention is to learn and bridge the gap, then we can find common ground. And when you find common ground, then the funny thing happens.
That's the whole point of the show.
Yeah. And Andrea and I have this, we both, and I think you expressed it so well too, which is, we really both want to resist the idea that there's an enemy, except for in those extremes. Of course, there's extremists that I'm like, I don't need to talk to that person. But we really both want to resist the idea that I know this one thing about you, therefore I know everything about you. And that is where we come together and what we try to do in these conversations.
Well, and it seems like there's so often, whether it's political things or almost anything, those walls go up with our kids, with our spouses, with our neighbors, with all sorts of people. And people are often really ill-equipped. Somehow there's this defensive, pattern. And I just loved how you even said, unless they're extreme or unless they're actually violent, you're not going to judge a group. Like, you're open to it. And to me, I'm really trying to become more and more open and sincerely curious. So we really try to do that on the show. We really try to say, okay, let us not judge. Let us be sincerely curious.
Check out the Starts With Us group. I really believe
I just wrote it down.
compassion, curiosity, and courage are their mottos, and it is a great. Started by the Daniel Lubitsky, the billionaire craft guy. He's the one who runs it and does an all on the meetings, and it's a really it's a bit of a who's who in terms of people involved. I'm by far like the least famous person.
Well, good for you. It sounds like a great alignment.
But the work they're doing is really important, and I believe in it. And so much of what I've discussed today, and that's how I met Tony. I mean, Tony introduced me to them because he was part of the thing, and it's a really great approach to life. And really, I think the only thing that'll save us is if we can start talking.
Yeah, no, that's it. All right, thank you so much, Ed. Ed has an amazing Instagram presence. Instagram, edlatimore.com. He's on YouTube at Ed Latty. Twitter, Substack. He's got a website, edlatimore.com.
And we'll put Latimore everywhere.
And Latimore everywhere. That's what we say.
Happy we didn't name Henry after me. That's hard for him.
All right. Thanks so much, Ed.
Hey, thanks.
So good. So good. Oh my gosh. What a wonderful man. I love that. Honestly, I was surprised because I felt like, I thought we were going to get a little something else, but that was wonderful. So thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in to our show with Ed Latimore. If you are interested in giving us feedback, asking questions, suggesting guests, please email us at openrelationships@yourtango.com. We would be super grateful if you followed us or subscribed to us. We also welcome your feedback on YouTube or iHeart or wherever you're getting this podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you again soon.